"This is my house, get out." The words didn't thunder. They didn't shake the walls or rattle the windows. They were whispered, cold and sharp as a scalpel, slicing through the humid, salt-thick air of the living room. That's what my brother-in-law, Todd, had yelled at my father just moments before. But now, the tables had turned. I stood in the doorway of the $425,000 seaside home I had gifted my parents for their 50th anniversary, holding a white bakery box tied with blue string. My knuckles were white. The cake inside, lemon with buttercream frosting, my mother's favorite, felt heavy as a tombstone. Inside, the scene was a tableau of broken spirits. My mother, Margaret, stood near the kitchen island, her face pale and drained of blood. Her tears soaked a checkered dish towel she gripped in both hands like a white flag of surrender. My father, Frank, a man who had spent 40 years working double shifts at a chemical plant, a man whose hands were calloused from labor and love, stared at the floor, his lower lip trembling in a way I had never seen before. And then there was my sister, Amber. She was laughing. It was a proud, jagged sound, as if chaos was the only inheritance she was interested in claiming. I stood there, the ocean breeze dying at my back, the keys cold and hard in my palm. I didn't shout, I didn't move. I only smiled once, a small, terrifying expression that didn't reach my eyes, and said something that made the laughter die instantly. They thought they had taken everything. They thought because they were loud, they were powerful. They had no idea what I had kept. They had no idea that while they were playing checkers with family loyalty, I had been playing chess with the law. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. I read every single one. To understand why I did what I did, why I eventually destroyed my sister's fantasy with a single folder of paperwork, you have to understand the silence of that room. It wasn't just an argument. It was a desecration. 2 weeks earlier, everything had felt lighter. The air had smelled like salt and fresh paint when I first unlocked the door of the little blue house by the water. I remembered the sound of the key turning in the lock, a smooth, heavy click that sounded like security, like a promise kept. But standing there now, looking at Todd's arrogant smirk and my mother's shattered posture, I realized that promises are fragile things. And sometimes, to keep them, you have to become the villain in someone else's story. I have always been the fixer. The one who remembered the deadlines, the one who paid the late fees, the one who smoothed over the cracks in the pavement so the rest of the Bennett family wouldn't trip. Growing up, I learned how fear tastes. It tastes like watered-down soup and the metallic tang of adrenaline when the landlord knocks on the door a little too hard. I remember Mom crying over late rent notices at the kitchen table, trying to hide the red ink with her elbows when I walked in. I remember Dad coming home from the plant, his boots leaving gray dust on the linoleum, his eyes gray with exhaustion, saying, "It'll be fine, Maggie, it'll be fine." I was 10 years old when I learned to say it'll be fine, even when I knew it wasn't. I carried that lesson into adulthood like a shield. I built a career in logistics and data management because I loved things that could be controlled. I loved columns that balanced and problems that had clear, definitive solutions. I paid Amber's utility bills when her first husband left. I covered the cost of my niece Kayla's braces when Todd forgot to pay the insurance premium. I did it quietly, efficiently, like it was my duty. Every transfer, every favor, every rescue felt like control. It wasn't. It was just enabling chaos wrapped in the guise of love. But this house, this was supposed to be different. I had spent months hunting for it. I wanted something modest, quiet, with sunlight that moved gently across the walls, the kind of light that heals you just by touching your skin. When I finally found it, a 2-bedroom cottage with blue siding and a wraparound deck overlooking the Atlantic, I knew. I wrote the final payment on a night when the code on my laptop blurred from exhaustion, my eyes burning, my coffee cold. But it didn't matter. I wanted them to have one thing in this world that couldn't be repossessed. One corner of the earth where the air didn't smell like debt. When I told my parents I wanted them to take a weekend drive with me, Mom thought it was a surprise dinner. Dad packed his fishing gear, assuming we were going to a pier. Neither of them had any idea. I can still see the moment they understood. We pulled into the crushed shell driveway. The ocean was a flat, shimmering sheet of turquoise behind the house. "Whose place is this, Sienna?" Dad asked, squinting at the structure. "Yours," I said. "It's yours, every part of it." They cried before they even stepped inside. Dad ran his hand along the banister like he was touching something sacred, something holy. Mom opened every cabinet, whispering, "It smells like lemon, it smells like clean." We sat on the deck that evening, the sky melting into a bruised purple and pink. We ate sandwiches wrapped in foil and drank iced tea. For the first time in 20 years, I saw Frank Bennett's shoulders drop. I saw the worry lines around Margaret Bennett's eyes smooth out. They looked like people who finally got to breathe. Before I left to head back to the city for a massive product deployment, I hid a note in the kitchen drawer. Just one line written on plain paper, for slow mornings and loud laughter. I drove away thinking they were safe. I thought peace had finally found a home in our family. Peace, I learned, is offensive to people who thrive on drama. 3 days later, Amber called my mother. I didn't think much of it. Amber called when she needed something. But by the 5th day, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a photo on social media. The image was glossy, heavily filtered. It showed a pair of legs resting on a deck railing, my parents' deck railing. The caption read, "Home sweet home, nothing like waking up to the ocean. Number blessed number beach life." It was Amber's account. I stared at the screen. The geotag was the town where the house was. In the background of the photo, I could see my father's favorite rocking chair, pushed into the corner, draped with a neon pink beach towel that definitely didn't belong to him. I felt a prickle of unease, a cold drop of water running down my spine. I called Mom. She didn't answer. I called Dad. It went to voicemail. Silence in my family is never peaceful. It is the deep breath before the scream. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe they invited Amber and Todd down for the weekend. Maybe they were sharing the joy. That's what families do, right? But the "Home Sweet Home" caption gnawed at me. It wasn't visiting Mom and Dad. It was a claim of ownership. When I pulled into the driveway that Saturday, the first thing I noticed was the massive black SUV parked crooked across the grass. Not in the driveway, on the grass. A tire had crushed the small bed of hydrangeas I had planted with Mom just a week ago. A loud, frenetic cartoon blared from inside the house. The front door was wide open, the white curtains fluttering in the wind like distress signals. Something in my chest tightened, a physical knot of dread. This wasn't a visit. This was an invasion. I grabbed the cake I had picked up, a happy first week celebration, and walked up the steps. The wood felt different under my feet. It didn't feel welcoming anymore. It felt exposed. The smell hit me first. The house, which had smelled of lemon and sea salt days ago, now smelled of stale grease, cheap beer, and wet dog. I stepped into the hallway. Boxes were stacked everywhere. Cardboard towers leaning precariously against the freshly painted walls. None of them belonged to my parents. I saw a plastic tote labeled "Summer Clothes Todd." Then I heard a man's voice booming from the living room. "Upstairs for us," the voice said. It was Todd. "The kids want the room with the ocean view. Frank can take the pull-out downstairs." My blood ran cold. When I turned the corner, the scene solidified into a nightmare. Todd was barefoot, wearing board shorts and a tank top, holding a dripping can of lager. He was standing in front of my father, looming over him. My father sat in a stiff dining chair by the window, his fingers trembling on the armrest, looking small and gray. Amber was sprawled on the new beige sectional, scrolling on her phone, her flip-flops half off, kicking the cushions. Mom whispered my name, I recall. It sounded like both a warning and a prayer. "Sienna." Todd didn't even look at me. He took a swig of his beer and gestured around the room with the can. "Family home, right?" he said, his voice thick with entitlement. "We're just settling in." Amber laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "Relax, Sienna. You know Dad's bad with stairs anyway. It's better this way. We'll handle things here." I could barely hear her over the static in my head. Family home. The words hit like a punch. I turned to my mother. "You told them?" She shook her head, her eyes glassy and terrified, darting between me and Todd. "They found out from a photo your dad posted. They just showed up." "She said it was fine," Dad muttered, staring at his knees. "She said, family helps family." The walls felt smaller. My sister's kids ran past, shrieking, trailing sand across the dark hardwood floors I had specifically chosen because they were durable, but not indestructible. Todd raised his voice over the cartoon noise. "Peak season's coming, Sienna. We could rent this place easy. I already made a listing. Got to make the house pay for itself, right?" I stared at him. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "You what?" He grinned, a greasy, wolfish expression. "Don't be weird, it's family money, family house. We put it on the platform. Cozy oceanfront escape." We're managing it. You're busy in the city anyway. Mom tried to speak, her voice paper-thin. They just need a few days, Sienna, just a few days. A few days, that was always the phrase. A few days became a few months. A loan became a gift. A favor became an expectation. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the cake at the wall and drag them out by their collars. I wanted to remind everyone whose name was on the deed, whose bank account had bled for this piece. But I looked at my father's trembling hands. I looked at the fear in my mother's eyes. Anger makes mistakes. Precision does not. If I exploded now, I would just be the dramatic sister again. Todd would gaslight me, Amber would cry, and Mom would beg for peace. I set the cake on the counter with a soft thud. "I'll be back tomorrow," I said quietly. Amber rolled her eyes, not even looking up from her screen. "You're always so dramatic, Sienna. God." Todd waved his beer. "Bring more of that sparkling cider when you come, the good stuff." I turned and walked out. Outside, the ocean was so bright it hurt to look at. I got in my car and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. They thought I was leaving to cool off. They thought I was retreating. They didn't know I was driving home to plan their eviction. Legally, quietly, permanently. I parked 2 blocks away from my own apartment in the city, walking the rest of the way so the rhythm of my footsteps could calm my heart rate. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my desk, bathed in the cool glow of my monitors, and opened the folders I'd built for this exact kind of emergency. Payments. HOA rules, trust paperwork. I had asked my attorney to prepare the trust the week I closed on the house. It was a safeguard I hoped I'd never need, like a fire extinguisher. I pulled everything open and read it like a surgeon studying an X-ray. The deed was recorded in a trust, the Bennett Family Revocable Trust. Trustee, Sienna Bennett. Lifetime beneficiaries, Frank and Margaret Bennett. The language was clear, simple, and brutal. Exclusive occupancy for the beneficiaries. No one else. Then I found the listing. Todd hadn't even been subtle. He used photos I had taken, my photos of the sunset, the kitchen, the lemon bowl. He had copy-pasted my descriptions word for word. And worst of all, the payout routing number matched Todd's personal checking account. I dug deeper. I had a group chat history on my tablet that Amber had forgotten she added me to years ago, an old family planning thread they rarely used. But they had used it today. There was a message from Todd: "We'll get him on board if Mom cries, Frank is soft." And Amber's reply: "Just say it's for the kids. Sienna won't kick out the kids." My stomach turned, a hot, acidic roll of nausea. But my fingers didn't stop. I highlighted, I printed, I labeled. I called the HOA emergency line. The woman on the phone was perfunctory at first, annoyed at a late call, until I read the clause from the bylaws aloud. Clause 4.2. No short-term rentals permitted under any circumstances. Minimum lease term, 6 months. She went quiet. Violations are subject to immediate fines and towing of unauthorized guest vehicles, she said, her tone shifting to professional alertness. I would like to report a violation at 24 Seaview Lane, I said, and I am the owner. I asked for an email confirming the rule. She sent it immediately. Proof. Next, I booked a locksmith. Not just any locksmith, but a security specialist named Mr. Russo. I left him a note in the booking request. "We'll need to change outer lock, keypad reprogram, and remove unauthorized user codes. Priority situational awareness required." Small, mundane actions. But when they lined up, they felt enormous. They felt like armor. I forwarded the screenshot of the listing to the Rental Platforms Trust and Safety inbox, attaching the deed and the trust document. Fraudulent listing. Unauthorized host. Finally, I wrote a short, boring email to a neighbor list I'd found in the closing packet. "Hello neighbors, there may be unauthorized activity at 24 Seaview. I am the trustee and will be taking steps to ensure compliance tomorrow. Apologies for the noise." I hit send. I watched the little blue dot move across my screen like a metronome. I finally fell into a shallow, precise kind of doze around 4 a.m. My mind ran through contingencies. What if Todd refused to leave? What if Amber posted a video of Dad crying? What if they tried to claim squatters' rights? I imagined their faces when their leverage collapsed. It was a small, private cruelty, but it felt deserved. At dawn, I drove back to the coast with a manila folder in my lap. It held 5 things. 1. The recorded deed. 2. The trust instrument. 3. A color screenshot of the Airbnb listing. 4. The forwarded chat log where they conspired to manipulate my parents. 5. The HOA violation notice. The folder smelled faintly of printer ink and coffee. It steadied me more than any pep talk could. When I walked up the path, the house looked the same as the day I had left it, but the vibe was jagged. Inside, the cartoon theme was looping again. The clink of beer cans. Todd waved a hand at me like I was an uninvited extra in his movie. "You're back early." Amber's laugh sliced the air. My mother's face folded in on itself. I didn't raise my voice. I set the folder on the coffee table and arranged the pages with the care of someone setting a surgical tray. "Everyone to the living room," I said. Not loud, not dramatic, precise. The kids paused. Even the dog cocked its head. Todd's grin faltered, like someone leaning against a wall and finding it had become glass. "This is my house," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "Get out." Mark's voice bounced off the walls. "Excuse me," I laid the first page on the coffee table. "Deed," I said, tapping the header. "Recorded last week. Property owned by the trust I established. Lifetime beneficiaries Frank and Margaret. They have exclusive occupancy," Todd scoffed. "Big words, it's family property." "Wrong," I said evenly. "It's theirs, not yours, not mine, theirs." I set the second document beside it. "Trust instrument, I'm the trustee. My legal duty is to remove anyone who interferes with their peace or jeopardizes the asset." Amber's voice turned sweet, that sickening, sugary tone she used when she wanted money. "We're helping, Sienna. Dad can't handle the stairs. We're just settling in to help them." I cut in. I dropped the next page, a printed screenshot. "Your listing. Entire home. Oceanfront. Booked weekends through August. Payout to Todd's account." Mom gasped. The sound was like a tear in fabric. My father closed his eyes, a look of deep, weary pain crossing his face. Todd's jaw tightened. "You're not here half the time, it's only fair, someone has to watch the place." "This isn't fairness," I said. "It's theft dressed as family." I flipped the next page. Text messages filled the sheet. "We'll get him to cave if Mom cries." Silence cracked open the room. Mom stared at the paper like it might explode. She looked at Amber, betrayal washing over her features. And finally, I placed the last page. "HOA rules, no short-term rentals. Violation already reported. If you stay, the fines begin at $500 a day, billed to the owner. Which means billed to the trust. Which means you are stealing from Mom and Dad's future to pay for your vacation." The TV cartoon went mute. Even the air stopped moving. Todd leaned closer, beer in hand, his face reddening. "Or what? You'll call the cops on your own family." "Or I'll fulfill my duty as trustee," I said. I set my phone on the table, screen up. "Here is the drafted email to the HOA board. Here is one to the county recorder. Another to the rental platform, listing link attached. And this." I pointed to the open text thread on my screen. "Is Mr. Russo, the locksmith, parked outside?" A car door shut outside. Crisp and calm, Amber paled. "You wouldn't dare." Mom looked at me, trembling. She looked at the text message where her own daughter plotted to make her cry. Then she looked at Dad. "Bella," Mom whispered. "Do what you need to do, permission." After years of excuses, she'd finally given it. Todd straightened, puffing his chest out. "You think paper scares me?" "No," I said. "Reality does." He lunged to grab the documents. I moved them aside without breaking eye contact. "Don't touch my work," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "Your work is grilling burgers and spending money you don't have. My work is protecting them." Amber's voice cracked. "You're humiliating us. You did that when you posted 'Home Sweet Home' from someone else's kitchen." "Here's what happens next," I said, ignoring her outburst. "You will pack your things. You will delete the listing. You will refund every booking you accepted. You will apologize to Dad, and you will leave your keys here." Amber laughed, too high, too shrill. "Or what?" "Or Victor changes the locks in 5 minutes," I said. "And you can film your tantrum in the driveway for your followers." The doorbell rang, 3 cheerful chimes. "That's him," I said. Todd turned toward the sound. "Don't touch that lock." Mr. Russo stepped inside, a tool bag on his shoulder. He looked like a man who had seen everything and was impressed by none of it. "Afternoon, you must be Sienna." I nodded and handed him a paper. "Authorization letter. Trustee signature." He read it, smiled politely, and went to work on the front door. Todd pointed at my father. "Old man, tell her to stop, tell her." Dad's voice cracked, but it held. He stood up slowly, painfully. "This is our house, Todd. We're staying, you're leaving." Mom's hand slid into his. For once, she didn't apologize for it. Todd sputtered. "You'll regret this, Sienna." "I regret enabling you for a decade," I said. "This is correction, not cruelty." I held out my hand. "Keys." Todd slapped his on the table with enough force to crack the plastic casing. Amber tossed hers after a long, hateful pause. Behind us, the sound of Mr. Russo's drill word, clean, final, mechanical. A few clicks later, he appeared with the new keypad. Code's ready, who gets it? I looked at Dad. You pick. He whispered 4 numbers, his wedding month and year. Mr. Russo entered them, nodded, and handed me the instruction strip. I placed it in a folder labeled Happy Things on the entry table. You could have just talked to me, Amber sniffled, playing the victim until the bitter end. I have been, I said. You just mistook silence for permission. Todd crossed his arms. We'll see you in court. You won't, I said, because I'll see you first. You think you're clever, he sneered. No, I said. Just prepared. Mr. Russo packed up his tools. All done, he said softly. Old keys won't work anymore. Have a good evening. Thank you, I replied. When the door clicked shut behind him, the house seemed to exhale. Todd and Amber carried boxes down the stairs, muttering threats about lawyers and loyalty. On the porch, Amber paused, her eyes glossy with angry tears. You think this ends here? No, I said. It ends when you stop taking what was never yours. She blinked, turned, and walked toward the SUV. The dog jumped in after the kids. Todd slammed the door and peeled out, tires scraping gravel, leaving a cloud of dust that settled slowly over the crushed hydrangeas. When the sound of their engine faded, the silence returned. But it wasn't the tense silence of before. It was the sound of the ocean breathing. The windows sang softly in the wind, like they were remembering what calm sounded like. Mom poured tea, her hands trembling less now. I didn't want you to see this side of her, she whispered, looking at the empty driveway. I needed to, I answered. Boundaries don't exist until someone crosses them. Dad looked at me over his cup. I should have said something sooner. You did, I said. You called me, that was enough. I opened my laptop at the kitchen table. I forwarded the HOA confirmation to myself and canceled the illegal bookings on the platform manually, issuing refunds with a short note to each guest. Listing removed by owner. Property is a private residence. Apologies for the confusion. Then I typed a neighbor letter. You may have seen extra cars. Confusion resolved. No rentals moving forward. When I finished, I felt lighter. Not triumphant, just clean. Mom sliced the cake, the one that had waited through the entire war. She laughed once at the absurdity of it, then handed me a plate. We ate quietly. The icing was lemon and sugar, sharp and sweet. My phone buzzed. A notification from the platform confirming the listing's permanent removal. Then a text from Amber. You made Mom cry. I deleted it without opening. Dad looked out the window at the water, his profile soft against the glass. It's finally quiet, he said. I nodded. That's how love should sound. He smiled faintly. We'll get used to that. As the sky dimmed to a deep gold, I slipped the documents back into the folder labeled Boring Armor. Because boring, I'd learned, is the opposite of chaos. And that's how peace stays. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the windows, quiet and steady. The house smelled like toast and ocean salt. My father sat on the deck with his coffee, legs crossed, reading the paper he hadn't touched in years. My mother hummed softly while watering the plants I'd brought. For the first time in a long time, peace didn't feel fragile. It felt earned. Online, the storm came and went. Amber's posts about betrayal and greedy siblings lost traction when she couldn't spin the narrative against the legal facts. The platform banned her account for fraud. The HOA issued her a warning letter for the disturbance. When she texted a demand for emotional damages weeks later, I didn't reply. I just archived it. Weeks passed. Mom sent me a photo of her feet on the deck rail, pink toenails glinting in the sun. Dad called to say he'd finally slept through the night without waking up worrying about the plant or the bills. That was all I needed. One evening, my niece Kayla messaged me secretly. Grandma looks happy there. I typed back. Come visit with her permission. No bookings, just pancakes. Sometimes victory isn't loud. It isn't a gavel banging or a crowd cheering. It's the quiet after the storm. It's the sound of locks clicking shut, keeping the bad out and the good in. It's the sound of love staying exactly where it belongs. A month later, I drove back to the coast. The house glowed in the evening light, calm and alive again. Through the window, I saw my father, reading glasses sliding down his nose. My mother sat beside him, a puzzle spread across the table, her laughter mixing with the ocean breeze. I didn't go in right away. I just stood there, listening to the sound of peace I'd fought for. Here's what I know now. Love isn't covering chaos with kindness. It isn't letting people steal from you under the excuse of family. Love is a house with working locks, paperwork that holds, and parents who can finally breathe easy. And if you've ever had to protect someone you love from their own family, you know exactly what I mean.